This is a presentation of SBE 15, New York City.
Welcome, Paul McLane from Radio World.
Hey, Conrad. How are you?
Good.
And everybody, privileged to be here. Pardon me, as I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, I was reflecting on the fact that as a person born in New York City myself on West 51st Street, I've always felt like I should be an honorary member of the chapter. And I was also thinking—
Paul, you're now president, by the way.
Oh, there you go. So you put your hand up, see what happens. Yeah, I'm just stretching. Oh, there he is. He volunteered. And I was thinking too, it's a shame there's a couple people I wish could have been here. I think about Chris Tobin, who passed away not that long ago, and my good friend John Lyons. I can't think about New York. And I get a little emotional about it because I know he would have been on this call and he would have been busting on me and David Antoine and a few of us others for being baldies like him. So we'll just give it a rub for John there. But thanks for having me. And I thought I'd just give you a little quick overview of some of the things I saw and some of the products that caught my eye, and then we can chat if you want. A big thing I was watching for, like a lot of folks, was just who's going to show up. I confessed that a few months ago before the show, I wasn't really even sure we'd be able to have it given all the ups and downs of the pandemic. And I know several engineers who in the past would absolutely never, ever miss a spring show who missed this one, either because they were, they didn't feel ready for live events or because they were too busy, or a few, were quite explicit and said we didn't appreciate the vaccination protocol, but for whatever reason, didn't come. But a lot of people did. Will it ever be the NAB show that we used to know in recent years? It's hard to say. The experience of online events, even on SBE chapter meetings, have probably changed them permanently. But even though this was a transitional year, I said at the outset to myself that if NAB got even half of a normal convention, they'd call it a success. Just being able to have the event and in that venue and getting the annual cycle going again. Well, NAB reported preliminary reg of 52,500. That compares to 91,500 3 years ago. So they met the bar in that regard. I mean, a 40% decline in attendance would normally be catastrophic, but this has been anything but a normal situation. And it's kind of hard to think about it, but it actually was 3 years since we last had a spring show because of the way the timing worked out. From the standpoint of the exhibit floor, most of the vendors I talked to gave the convention positive reviews. They described a good, welcome energy, regular traffic, at least for most of the first 3 days, and predominance of serious rather than casual shoppers. Jeff and I were just talking about this. Not all. I mean, there were some vendors who complained to me, and some usually do. And there were a few that didn't like the West Hall. They felt a little isolated, but overall the vibe was good. International attendance was still surprisingly strong. I mean, it was down like everything else, but they still had about 22% from countries outside the US. And that's close to its normal percentage. And there were like 900 exhibitors, which is still pretty good. Normally they have about 1,600. And it was also the first show that they started the exhibits on Sunday. So that seemed to go pretty smoothly. But overall, a very good welcome energy. A big part of the experience was experiencing that new West Hall, which is very impressive, very beautiful. The convention was entirely in Central, North, and West. The West Hall is far away. At least the way that NAB show had it, it felt like it took a long time to go hike over there. There was no single concentration of radio booths this year. They didn't have sort of Radio Central. So if you wanted to go visit your vendors, you'd have to go to all three, and you found yourself moving from hall to hall. So if you go next year, my hint is to budget time in a given hall. This is my day to go to West, because if you end up running back and forth, you're going to spend a lot of time running back and forth. That's what I did. The convention center is huge. This map, I just downloaded this today, but this map gives you an idea of it. And it's the dark gray are the halls. We didn't use the South Hall. We used West, North, and Central, but that distance is still big. That blue line is the LVCC loop, that underground service that you can shuttle back and forth in. That's an Elon Musk project. And it does help, but I got to tell you, when you're in the West Hall and you want to go back to the North or Central Hall, you have to walk away from where you want to go to get on this shuttle. And you go down the tunnel, and a lot of folks just decided to walk. I rode the loop. You can see the tunnel there. Up the upper right is where you would drive in, and then the cars come out the other way. I took it once or twice. It was cool the first time, you know, but until they automate it, it's really just an underground Uber ride in a Tesla. The new NAB president and CEO was there welcoming the industry, Curtis Leggett. He gave remarks that suggest he's going to continue the themes and the priorities of that the association has emphasized recently under Gordon Smith. You know, he ticked off what NAB wants. NAB wants Congress to pass legislation to rein in the power of big tech. That's a big theme for them right now. They want lawmakers to modernize media ownership laws to reflect what the NAB considers the realities of the marketplace. And this, of course, has been a theme that NAB has been harping on for years and arguing that broadcasters are unduly regulated. Broadcast ownership is unduly regulated compared to the competitors that are out there. The NAB also wants the FCC to recognize that the industry's ability to function in the public interest is premised on its economic viability. So when the NAB makes its arguments to the commission about various issues, one of the things they're saying is, if we're going to serve the public interest, we need to be economically viable. And they're against the performance fee, which they've been against for years, but the idea seems to have fresh traction on Capitol Hill right now, and the NAB is taking that seriously. Over on the right, if you can see it, that's Leggett talking to Jessica Rosenworcel, the FCC chairwoman. Many on this call know that the commission's been putting fresh emphasis on EAS and wireless emergency alerts. Last year, the commission decided that your state emergency communications committees need to meet at least annually, and they need to submit their EAS plans for FCC approval. In fact, that deadline is coming up this summer. They're not the only ones, though, working on EAS. The NRSC issued a new guideline document with best practices about how you implement EAS functionality. It has background info about EAS and examples about how stations are using it. It talks about where alerts come from and the proliferating methods of delivery. For a lot of folks on this call, probably these are basics, but for somebody who maybe doesn't know EAS or hasn't been dealing with recent developments in it, it gives it a really nice overview. That's an example of its discussion about metadata or FM. That graphic is from the guideline document. It's called NRSC G303. And there's our NRSC colleagues. The guideline is not a requirement. It's just best practices document. It was the first opportunity for these guys to meet face-to-face since 2019, and they got more than 30 attending, many of whom posed for our photographer here. It's always impressive to see the engineering firepower in that group. Also on the alerting front, there's a venture that was announced called America's Emergency Network. This will use ATSC3, the next gen television format, to let alert originators like the Weather Service and Shake Alert send out geo-targeted messages, even if utilities fail. Why is it relevant for this discussion? Because the network actually marries ATSC3 to the existing Alert FM system, which uses FMRDS in 12 states. There was a demo at the Tolkla TV booth where they were demonstrating the AEN Alert hybrid RDS with an ATSC3 receiver dongle. So I have a feeling we'll be hearing a lot more about ATSC3 derived technologies. Not something on the exhibit floor, but on the minds of a lot of broadcasters was this idea to make daylight saving time permanent. And as you probably know, the US Senate passed that unexpectedly, and as far as I can tell, without really understanding what it was doing. One engineering executive with a lot of AM stations told me, "I am not a fan of this. The physics of skywave," he said, "the physics of skywave does not change when Congress decides to change the time associated with the position of the sun." So I'll buy that. There's been talk of a standard 7 a.m. sign-on, but that engineer said he doesn't think Class A's out west would stand for it. Personally, I don't see this idea getting through Congress, but we had a story about it in a recent issue. The NAB store was back, though someone in this group might want to write a letter to the store management, because I don't think that shirt is their best work as far as I'm concerned. All digital AM, Conrad mentioned that. The performance of all digital AM HD radio signals was in the spotlight, with a presentation on the effects of directional antenna pattern bandwidth on MA3 transmissions, MA3 transmissions, excuse me. Mike Raid of Xperi and Dave Colasar of Hubbard, whom you've probably gotten to know over the years if you follow this issue. They came to the NAB show with a talk about their testing at WWFD in Frederick, Maryland. They have been on air in all digital now for 4 years. Hard to believe. That is a long time SDA. They outfitted the Xperi test van with a reference antenna, a spectrum analyzer, and a test receiver, and they drove through the station's null. And they took measurements on field strength, spectrum analyzer plots, and digital signal constellations. And then they plotted the points on a map, and they overlaid the directional pattern on top of it. So what they found was that the MA3 transmission system, the all-digital AM, is remarkably durable. That was the phrase Dave used. Remarkably durable with regards to dealing with nonlinearities in the null. But because of nonlinearities in the antenna system, you pay a price in the robustness of the reception. So the big conclusion of the presentation is that it's really important for a station that wants to switch over to all digital AM HD to pay attention to its antenna system, particularly if it's a directional.
I second that.
Hey, all right. Ashraf El Denari of Xperi Corp received NAB's Excellence in Radio Engineering Award. That's him with his wife Pam on the left. We profiled him in a cover story recently. Not many people jump from spacecraft engineering to broadcast technology, but that's what Ashraf did when his radio career started 24 years ago. He wasn't looking for a broadcast career, but he got a 6-month contract to write software. He was working at the time at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, working on instrumentation in support of space research. And today he's the Senior VP of Digital Platforms at Xperi, where he oversees HD radio systems engineering and represents the HD radio technology with international regulatory bodies. On the business front, Thomson Broadcast will acquire Gates Air. They made that announcement just as the show was opening. That's a deal involving 2 companies that both have deep radio and TV roots. Both of them have been around for a century, though not being owned by the original founding companies. They announced an agreement for Thomson to acquire Gates Air from the Gores Group. They did not announce terms. The transaction is expected to close later this year if it passes regulatory approvals. There's a conversation there in the Gates booth being shown. You might remember that 10 years ago, Gores purchased Harris Broadcast from the bigger Harris Corporation. And at that time, the price tag was $225 million. And then shortly thereafter, they split that business into Imagine Communications and what they called Gates Air. Thomson Broadcast is headquartered in France, and you might know it as the company that did the first live radio transmission from the Eiffel Tower in 1937. More recently, it was acquired about 4 years ago by an entrepreneurial company based in Madagascar. Thomson's trying to expand its presence in the US market with this move. Gates Air did celebrate its 100th anniversary, or is celebrating it this year. And we recently had a fun story in Radio World that featured a lot of great old photos like this one. Gates Radio, of course, started in 1922 in Quincy, Illinois, by Henry and Cora B. Gates. Most of you probably know the story. And their son, Parker, who at age 14 was the company's engineering visionary. He later headed it up as Gates Radio and Supply, and that company was sold to Harris Intertype in 1957, which became Harris Corporation later on. That's Henry Gates up the right. To his left, standing is Clinton Norris, the first employee hired by Gates Radio. Parker Gates is next to him. In that pic, we can see amplifiers with a speaker on the right side there and a square-headed microphone in front of the table. This picture was provided courtesy of Janet Conover Gates, so right from the source. Everyone's been talking about virtualization and cloud, 2 different terms, but related terms. And that certainly continued at the show. In the past year and a half, we've seen a real surge in discussion and awareness. There's been important work being done by the NAB Radio Technology Committee on these themes. And some of the manufacturers are taking an active role in educating the industry. For example, with the Container University, it's a webinar series being run by the Telos Alliance. It looks at the use of software containers and their implications for broadcast operations. Telos itself was not an exhibitor this year at the NAB show, but it had a presence in a number of dealer booths. To that point of cloud, specifically, Nielsen encoding is being put in the cloud. EAS is being put in the cloud. Broadcasters are exploring putting audio processing there. What else can we virtualize? That's the question that continues to be asked. And related question, what does it mean for the design of new facilities? What does it mean for radio infrastructure? What's to say we need the same size studio facilities? And if businesses fully embrace these trends, what are the implications for localization? That comes up time and again when I talk to people about this. The kind of questions that come up are typified in the interview we had recently with Bob Orban, who, talking about processing specifically, he told us that moving the audio processing in and out of the cloud without dropouts, glitches, or unacceptable latency is challenging. And he said broadcasters have to make a choice right now between the reliability and low latency of current hardware processors and the potential convenience of not having to own and maintaining the hardware. I think that quote could be applied to all categories of equipment right now. But he also, interestingly, he said he sensed some backlash about the idea of putting everything in the cloud. So this is probably something that, takes years to play out. One example of how it is playing out was on the exhibit floor in the Nautel booth. They have a collaboration with Telos in this area. Nautel says software can do so much to provide standby air chains, integrated processing, secure transport, and it can eliminate FM and HD blending issues. And so that's been a big theme for them. Philip Schmid gave a talk in the Broadcast Engineering Conference about a cloud-capable synchronized transport architecture for FM and HD. And as you see here, they are emphasizing the role that their partners play in modulation and in monitoring and audio processing. Staying on the floor, also from Nautel, 10 FM analog models make up its new VX series line. They're excited about this and the small footprint of these transmitters. The power outputs range from 150 watts to 5 kilowatts. And these have a depth of only 20 to 25 inches, which is good. Control is via their new HTML5 AUI. The advanced user interface has been overhauled at Nautel across the product line, by the way. And the power supplies are hot swappable. They can be easily removed, as you can see in the small photo at lower right, or at least on my screen. It's partly obscured by some of your pretty faces, but it's easy to remove the power supply from the front. The RF power chain in these transmitters is based on a new high voltage FET, and it's mated with dual core DSP. Nautel says it built in a lot of headroom for future improvements. These aren't shipping yet. The lower power models will come later this year, and then the 3 to 5 kilowatts will be due early next year. Another take on virtualization, Wheatstone talked about a product that it says makes possible full virtualization from mic to transmitter for broadcasters who aren't ready to put their chain in the public cloud. They call it Wheatstone Layers, and they describe it as a software-based broadcast chain from glass consoles to back-end mixing and processing. It's a software suite that runs on enterprise IP services. The user can host multiple instances from an IT server for several studios or locations that are connected by the WheatNet IP network. They can also mix and control from a laptop or a tablet or another physical surface. With this, you can consolidate several stations and studios into 1 or 2 servers. You can add instances for back-end mixing, FM processing, stream provision, and managing your metadata. And you can do backup WheatNet studios in a redundant server. So interesting to see these things playing out. This can replace processors, mix engines, streaming appliances, that kind of thing. It's been interesting to watch Mike Dosh's company, Angry Audio, get off the ground. As you probably know, he started out establishing a reputation for interesting, thoughtful gizmos like the fun headphone disconnector cable that the company makes. But the product line is getting more substantial quickly. Its latest is this one, the Chameleon C4. It's a live stream audio processor specifically for streaming and HD audio processing. And it's the first in a line of boxes that he plans to build. The designer of this is Corny Gould, who's well known in audio processing. And it uses a form of artificial intelligence to analyze the audio and make processing decisions. As a result, one of the selling points of it is that while most processors allow you a great deal of being able to twiddle the details, with the Chameleon, the idea is you plug it in and you adjust for basically light, medium, or heavy processing. You set the level, simple and clean. It does have a precision loudness control, though, so you can set any loudness target from -24 to -14 LUFS. The box started shipping right before the NAB, and the cost is $999. The next one that the company will be out with is a headphone version, which is just shipping this week. The idea being that, most air talent are listening to dry, flat, unprocessed audio in their headphones. So Angry Audio made a version of this, a low latency processor for the air talent to use, basically a utility amplifier that costs $699. Now, I think the company's doing some really interesting stuff. Processing was a real active category right across the board. This is an advanced audio processor from Timeo for FM, AM, HD, and streaming. Timeo makes that software-based stereo tool that you may know about. And this is a hardware version of it. It has features like de-lossifier, an advanced composite clipper designed by Hans von Zutphen, auto EQ, and so forth. And it has an interface that can be used from a PC, tablet, or smartphone. But why buy the box? Well, it's kind of more plug and play. There's nothing to configure. According to the company, the firmware and the hardware are tuned to each other, so you don't have to deal with sound card settings, CPU usage, and synchronization. And by using the hardware, you get better protection against firmware issues. The box actually keeps track of whether the processing is running correctly, and then if it detects any problems, it triggers a reboot of the system. What does it cost? $79.95, just under $8,000. It's distributed in North America by the Max Connect Group, Josh Bone's company, that's Josh there, with Hans von Zutphen. And Max Connect Group itself is doing a lot of interesting work these days. I said processors were popular, and I mentioned a trend to centralization. This one combines the two themes. Orban says its new processor is intended to help broadcasters and streamers who have high density needs. It's Optimod XPN Enterprise. This is Linux-based, and it's a customizable platform for controlling multiple signals from a single point. So what you get is OptiCloud processing for up to 8 FM and 8 HD or DAB radio channels and 8 internet streams, a total of 24 output channels. And you use their enterprise nodes for connecting to the server processing platform. The content is brought to one location, your choice, AES3, AES67, simply 2110, Dante or Livewire. And the outputs can be analog, AES3, FM composite, DMPX, or Orban micro MPX. They use nodes for distribution to each of your transmitter sites or streams. Handy presets are part of it too, and there's something called less or more controls that basically make it easy for users to fine tune it. So you're seeing these manufacturers thinking more about the non-technical user when they're designing these products. Pardon me. Broadcast Bionics had a software offering that lets you turn any area in your facility into a content creation studio. They call it Bionic Table. But there's actually no table. You supply the table, and you supply an edge device like a Telos Mic X node, and then your microphones and your headphones, up to 4 of them. Then you connect your laptop or your tablet or your phone, and you choose the utensils you want from the table menu. Those might be your mics, your audio sources, your audio beds, your phones, your webcams. The table has auto mix to control levels, and you can record a session and download the recording as a stereo mix or a multi-track file. The output is a broadcast quality live audio stream that's available over the network, and it can be made available for streaming or as a file. The Bionic software is doing the work on a machine or a virtual machine in your building or in the cloud. So basically, it's a way to put a studio in a breakout room or a meeting room or even in your home. Cost is $3,250 per table to buy it, plus a support fee, but they also offer a version based on an ongoing subscription, annual fee, I believe it is. Seeing that option a lot too with these various products that are being offered these days, more of that monthly or annual fee. Audio Science showed a new generation of its streaming radio tuner. This is the ASI 2816. It's a multi-channel streaming tuner, and the box is just one single rack space, but it can be configured with up to 4 modules, and each of those has 4 radio tuners, so that's up to 16 tuners in a box. One of the available modules contains 4 AM, FM, and weather band tuners, and another contains 4 AM, AM-HD, FM, and FM HD tuners. The OLED display has current configuration and status, like band, frequency, and signal strength. But the web interface at the right there, you can see it offers you quite a lot of configuration and monitoring of the tuners and the stream settings. Nice looking interface. From DJB Software is a solution for internet radio applications, remote broadcasts, and podcasting. DJB Radio Studio is based on the company's Button Box. That's its infinite Cartwall software. Now, this is a low-cost item. The pricing is still being finalized. I checked in with them today, but it's going to have an upfront price in the low hundreds of dollars. And then an annual license that's probably going to be about $100 a year. And you can connect 10 audio sources to a PC or a laptop or a Windows tablet to create your audio podcasts or your recordings. There's an on-screen mixer with VUs for each channel, and it lets you mix your local Cartwall or your PlayStack audio with your externals like USB mic, audio interface, or such. Basically, you can record a podcast with the push of a button, and you can pause and resume recording, and then you can edit the product in its waveform editor. So it's got a lot going on in there. It also has a scheduler to rotate music and IDs, has a database editor, and drag and drop. So you can move tracks onto the Cartwall and then clean them up with the waveform editor. It made a really good impression. On the floor as well, Inovonics is out with 2 new mod monitors, the models 551 and 552. These are for advanced FM and HD signal monitoring. These snagged one of our Best of Show awards, in fact. Ben Barber of Inovonics told me these last couple of years have seen really great strides in mod monitor development work at his company. And I think we've seen that from a lot of manufacturers. There's been a lot of R&D work going on in the background, despite the economic challenges and supply chain issues. Really, there's been a lot of work going on at these companies. This is the 551. It has that big 7-inch touch screen that displays modulation data in a graphic format. And the data is available via remote web interface. The audio outputs are available for FM and for digital channels HD 1 through 4. The big box version retails for just under $10,000. It's a sophisticated box. I did find it online for about 10% less than that. The 552 is a single rack version for remote installations where you don't need the big graphic, the big interface, and you can use the graphic web interface. That retails for $8,800. And you can view an online demo of how it looks. I'm actually going to try this here, just see if I can pull this off without breaking the internet here. So we'll just log into their online demo. Yeah, there it is. So they've got all sorts of funky fun.
We're still seeing your slide.
Oh, you can't see that? Oh, I pulled up on my screen. Let's see. I don't know if I can pull that off. Let's try this before I give up on it, though.
Probably need to unshare and reshare.
Let's try this.
There you go.
You see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the online interface, and they've got a lengthy menu of meters, spectrum plots, band scanner functionality. You could play with it all day. This demo is available on the Inovonics website. So you just go to the product page and click on it. It's publicly available. Now, can I get myself back? There's the question.
Mhm.
Let's see, screen sharing. Let's go there. Did it work?
Nope. Yep. It's there now.
Beautiful. All right, thank you. So moving on up to the tower, Dielectric is offering a new line of pylon antennas for use by FM radio stations. It says this is useful for broadband applications where antenna loading is an important consideration. Pylons, they tell us, are common in UHF and more recently in high band VHF. Dielectric says that in most cases, these slotted coaxial antennas have been limited to single channel TV uses because of their narrow bandwidth, but the company says it has solved those limitations for full band FM. Advantages include less wind load, simplicity in design, and flexibility with azimuth and elevation patterns. Each module has 4 bays. A single 4-bay module is the building block of that, and it can be used in numerous configurations to optimize coverage. John Shadler of Dielectric won a Best Paper Award for his presentation on this from the NAB Broadcast Engineering Conference. And incidentally, this is not on this topic, but just today, Dielectric got a win at the FCC, which approved the rule change it had been pushing for to allow FM directional stations to use computer modeling of their patterns. And so several manufacturers of antennas had been advocating for that change, Dielectric being definitely one of them, and the FCC just unanimously approved that today. We're hearing more about Q lately, and at the NAB show, the company and Xperi announced a strategic partnership that they think will make it easier for you to display and monetize content in connected cars. Q is that company. It's been around for a while. It lets you send synced on-screen messages that relate to your on-air content, including commercials. And they've been one of the companies that are talking about how important your visual presence is in the new iterations of connected cars and the new sophisticated dashboards that are coming out. So the two companies have now pitched themselves as an integrated solution for syncing programming and sales messages. In the past, a station would go to Xperi to deploy its RapID technology and then to Q for content management and monetization and reporting. But now you just go to Q for both of them. They say, by the way, that 80% of the cars on the road today can display text on the dash in one form or another. 80%, pretty impressive. The Public Radio Engineering Conference was back too. I wasn't in Vegas early enough for this, but I heard it was very good. The president of the Association of Public Radio Engineers is Victoria St. John, and she told us she would have been happy if 30 people showed up, and they had well over 100, which is great. The organization gave its Meritorious Service Award to Rich Parker, Director of Engineering at Coast Alaska in Juneau, Alaska, who was one of the founding members of the board of the APRE and an active part of public radio engineering for decades. Many people know him for his work at Vermont Public Radio and WHYY in Philadelphia. That's him at the upper left. And a few more to tell you about. Some of the conversations at the show focused on lessons of the past 2 years in working from home. And looking ahead, I moderated a panel that explored whether hybrid operations are here to stay. Not hybrid radio or hybrid IBOC, but hybrid as in businesses running both from the office and from home environments. And the short answer, to no one's surprise, is yes, but what that means and how it plays out was the topic of the discussion. It's clear that the pandemic transformed how many stations operate, and with these changes, more emphasis is being placed on good remote hardware and IT practices. The consensus seems to be that there's going to be these workflows in one form or another. In my experience, a lot of it depends on the attitude toward working from home at the very top. And sometimes it just comes down to whether the CEO feels like it's a good idea. But that's the real world we live in now. So on my panel, I had Sarah Foss, the Chief Technology Officer of Odyssey, Lamar Smith, the Vice President of Engineering for Beasley Media, and Brian Oliger and George Molnar, two of the technology leaders from WTOP and Federal News Network in Washington. And one example of our discussion, George Molnar said, WTOP is migrating to Microsoft 365, in part to provide in the cloud access and remote collaboration tools. Lamar Smith talked about the emphasis at Beasley on new VPN services and multi-factor authentication, along with very strict firewalls. And Sarah Foss said Odyssey has shifted a number of technologies to virtual and cloud-based, for instance, replacing phone systems to Zoom, which includes business lines for its teams. It was an interesting session. Exhibitors talked a lot, at least to me, about their supply chain headaches. Chips get the headlines, but it's also other components and supplies. And many vendors told me it's taking months to get what used to take weeks. Those kind of delays affect how long it takes you to get your new transmitter or your new codec. And the companies told us that their prices have zoomed, meaning what they have to pay for components. In a few cases, they even feel they're getting gouged by their component suppliers right now. And of course, that is a no-win situation for everybody involved, except the price gougers. One interesting aspect of this is that for manufacturers behind the scenes, part shopping has become a real specialty. That's become a key person. Of course, that role was always important, but the skills of finding inventory out in the market, negotiating good prices, and negotiating good delivery times have become highly prized at suppliers. You might have heard that companies usually aim to order supplies just in time to ship their own products. Well, one manufacturer told me that ordering just in time now has become ordering just in case. So plan against the worst. I think this quote from Ben Barber actually sums up current supply chain issues. Here I am holding a box that cost us $30,000. Now, this is when it helps to be a software company rather than a hardware company, but they're not immune either. I had a conversation with one of the big automation suppliers, and the head of the company told me quite openly that managing his workforce is a really big headache for him now, a lot harder, that he senses a real change in the attitude of the employees toward their work environment, expectations of pay, the conditions of high demand for employees and technology. And of course, there's the issue of inflation. So all of that being played out. And on a more personal note, I spoke at the Nautel user group meeting, and Nautel was kind enough to allow me a moment to salute 3 special engineers, because with the pandemic, we hadn't had the chance to congratulate them in person. The first was Jeff Welton, who's been serving the Nautel community for 30 years as a speaker and a writer and a source of wisdom. I love that Jeff gives lectures with titles like How Not to Blow Stuff Up. That's a lecture I'm going to attend. So we congratulated him for winning the NAB's Radio Engineering Achievement Award 2 years ago. The second is Jason Ornelas, who's helping disprove the theory, the commonly held wisdom that our industry's engineering leaders are all aging out. He is in his mid-30s, which is still a youngin in this business, but he has established himself as one of the thought leaders and influencers. Jason Ornelas works at Bonneville, and he received our Radio World Excellence in Engineering Award for 2020 and 21. And third is a gentleman who seems to be everywhere, contributing through IEEE Broadcast Technology Society, the SBE, the NRSC, and the Nielsen Technical Advisory Committee, as well as his own employer, Cox Media. Our honoree for the Excellence in Engineering Award for current year, was Cox Media's Roz Clark. Here we are presenting those to them, and I was able to dig into our photo archives, and I found these fun pictures of all 3 of them as younger men. So you never know what lives in the Radio World archives. That's our publisher, John Casey, on the right, and he is on the call with us today. So thanks for joining us, John. By the way, if you're not getting Radio World and you want to sign up, here's a link. It's a tiny URL, tinyurl.com/rwmag. Or you can just find a subscribe tab at our website, and you can sign up there for the issues as well as the daily Smart Brief. You know, I haven't talked much about Radio World itself, but I'll just say that these are exciting times for us. When our former parent company was acquired by Future, based out of the United Kingdom 4 years ago, we really didn't know what to expect. But Future is a dynamic organization, and it is a media company, consumer and business media company, and it's a much better fit for us than our old venture capital ownership was. Our CEO is a very dynamic woman who thinks big. And we've also had a lot more professional back-end support in the parts of the publication that readers don't often see, but it plays out in things like, our redesign and a more open look to the publication. Our email letters are now on the great Smart Brief platform. There's been a lot of welcome changes. We're also proud that we're coming up on very soon, just in a few months, we will have published 100 ebooks over the past decade. And I hope that you'll check them out at our website, radioworld.com/ebooks. I've been doing this job for 26 years, and I've always felt it was an honor to be entrusted with the job, the brand of Radio World and the responsibility of keeping it going. I mean, I didn't build it, I didn't start it, but I think I feel proud of the work that I and others on our team, like John Casey, have done to keep it coming through some pretty difficult times, especially for print trade media. Plenty of brands have come and gone, competitors have come and gone, and radio itself being challenged. So having a stable Radio World being a part of our lives means a lot to me. I want the publication to be a useful companion for you guys in your job and your career, and also to be fun and interesting, and showing a respect for radio history and tech history. And with that in mind, I love hearing input about how we can do better. So if you have any ideas along those lines, please let me know. So thanks for reading, thanks for listening, and I'm glad to say we're doing well in 2022 as well. So happy to take any questions.
Wow, that was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Where do we begin? Who's got questions?
Well, I'm curious to know if anybody on the call was at the show, or just raise your hand. I know Andrea was.
I was going to thank you for giving awards to so many board members. That's fantastic.
I think that it reflects the awesome role of SBE in this industry. So absolutely. Thank you. But I'm curious if others who attended can share any perspectives, same or different of what I said about the show.
I was there, and I didn't get to leave the Sprite Media booth very often, but we saw the attendance being, as you said, very willing to buy and very interested. They were there. Everybody was there on a purpose. But I do have a question for you. So I've been going to NAB for a number of years, and there's usually a theme. There's usually one product that stands out, and some of them are laughable. A couple of years back, it was drones. Before that, 3D TV, which is come and gone. And I wanted to know what you thought was the general theme of the show. What was the big thing that was shown this year? Because I didn't get to see much of it.
That's a good question. And then you're right that oftentimes something will really jump out. I don't know that I saw one. I mean, I think the news that everybody was talking about was the fact that we were together again after being apart for so long. So clearly that was a huge thing. The role of the cloud and virtualization, again, two separate but related concepts, really has come into sharp focus the last 3 years since we last met. But I can't say there was anything that really jumped out. On the HD radio front, on the connected car front, these are themes that were already important and that we'd been talking about for a long time. So I guess I'd struggle to really identify one. John Casey, if you saw something, I'd welcome your opinion about it, but I don't know there was something that was obvious. No, John.
No, I agree with the cloud side of things. A lot of product in that way. The software as a service, subscription-based types of products that used to be in hardware form are now being offered this way.
Yeah.
Lots of cloud stuff, I would say.
What was that, Andrea?
Lots of cloud stuff, which is fun when you go to a booth and ask what they do, and they say, oh, we have cloud this or that. And you're like, oh, you do nothing then. That's good.
I was going to say, one of the slides you showed was an end-to-end cloud solution Wheatstone had. So yes. You could basically run your whole station in the cloud.
Yes, that's as I understood the way they were presenting it. And as these concepts are presented, the questions I have always heard from engineers have been ones about reliability and security. And I was having a conversation, I don't know, 3 months ago with Philippe Generali of RCS, and they've been very ardent about putting forth the cloud first as disaster backup, but really about putting the whole thing forward as a backbone. And one of the things he said to me at the time was, well, how often does Amazon go down? And then like 2 days later, they were making headlines because there was a major Amazon Web Service failure. So it doesn't fill you with confidence, but I think that we're going to see a lot more of those kind of conversations, and I'm fascinated to know what kind of uptake they get from organizations like yours.
Well, we're seeing integration of devices like the PPM encoding being added to audio processing. I know they're looking to try and make the EAS a part of the audio processing chain.
Yes.
So, and then the Telos container thing is another move to the cloud, right? So maybe cloud was your theme, Jeff, that you're looking for.
Yeah. Now, a lot of the conversations I've had about virtualization, the providers are very quick to say, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's in the cloud. It could be your own infrastructure. And, they caution me against using the two terms synonymously. So I guess there's going to be differentiations. I have not attended any of their universities. I plan to do so, though, because I want to make myself more conversant with the concepts. But I do think it's a few years ago, we were all saying, well, you got to bone up on AOIP. So I think the thing is we got to bone up on the cloud.
I think one of our videos on the website is Kirk Harnack, right? Talking about the virtualization stuff, Jeff?
Yeah, that's true. We had Kirk a while back, and the video is available on demand. We do have a question that came in from one of our attendees, from Kenneth. Do you think that ATSC 3.0 will drive greater collaboration and or synergy between radio and television?
Yes. Short answer, I do. By no means am I an expert in what that next gen TV offers, but the promise of it does seem to prompt conversations and experimentation. And so I think so. And what form that's going to take, I'm not 100% sure. I believe WTOP in Washington is collaborating with them with ATSC3 right now in DC, and I haven't had a chance to get with them and understand exactly what they're doing. So I plan to pursue that. But I think the answer is yes. I think that's good. I think it's good that there's technology like that may push us to think creatively. Outside of that, the dynamism has been around the connected car conversations, and where are things like, I didn't mention DTS AutoStage, but Xperi has grand hopes for that and really are pushing it as a global hybrid radio solution. They really think that can be a global kind of a standard way of approaching connected car and keeping broadcast front and center. So that's another thing to keep an eye on. Other thoughts or questions? David.
Comment, supply chain issues seem to be impacting everything and every facet of all industries where there's something electronic connected. And you did gloss, you covered that a little bit, but like overall, are most of the manufacturers, from what you've heard and known, do they see light at the end of the tunnel, or is it just going to get worse and we have to reimagine? Well, okay, let me say this much. To me, a lot of the cloud activity and driving force behind it is going to be the chip shortages, because we're being forced to reimagine doing things without a box, and things needing to be containerized or software based, if you will.
Yeah. Well, it might be chicken and egg, but one is going to affect the other for sure. A lot of the answer to your original first question, I think, is the ultimately disappointing one of it depends, but it really does depend, because I would walk into one vendor booth and they would say, well, we bought parts well in advance. We are very conservative in how we stock up and we always have enough. Well, knock wood if you're that company, I think. But then the next one will be like Innovonics was quite upfront with me, and they said, this is hard for us. this is hard. You know, if you feel like you're literally being price gouged by your component, and these are, I mean, let's face it. I mean, we all know companies like Innovonics. I'm not going to just pick on them as an example. I will pick on them as an example, but they're not the only ones. These are ethical companies that are trying to serve an industry. Our industry runs on relationships. And so those guys don't feel like they can screw you with the price. They don't want to screw you with the price. And they feel really stuck in the middle. And then, you know, with big component orders too, I mean, from what I understand, transmitters, you know, if you've got a transmitter project, get started early. So is it going to come to an end? I don't think it's going to come to an end anytime soon. But of course, we're also in a period of a national economic uncertainty, an economically uncertain context. So maybe if the stock market and the overall economy start to, you know, get a little bit more stable, things will help. But it doesn't, you know, I don't know, baby formula, right? What's going to be next?
If I can add to that a little bit, maybe in 2 years, David, we're going to see an Intel factory in Columbus, Ohio.
Is that really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I heard a little bit of and read a little bit about that's a real possibility, and even to the point where, you know, Biden was kind of pushing for more companies to bring things stateside so that we're not caught behind the proverbial 8 ball again.
Exactly.
So, you know.
Yeah. Well, it was a common theme across those manufacturers that I talked to. And yet, that said, when the pandemic hit, you know, it's no secret, Radio World lives at the intersection of the buying and the selling, and we believe we play a role in that. We want to bring buyers and sellers together by presenting information about products and about engaging you with their content as well as our own. That's our business model. We all worried about the impact on the manufacturing community. I think the manufacturing community in radio done pretty darn well, all things considered. You know, and some of the R&D oriented companies, the Teloses and the Wheatstones and whatnot, and Comrex and Innovonics and others, you know, our good friends in the industry have done well. But it is a small industry. You know, there's not a whole lot of new business coming out of garages. There's a few, and you always love to see it. I wish there were a lot more.
Any other questions for Paul?
This has been fun. I'm available if anybody wants to reach out to me.
Yes, that's awesome. Did you provide contact info, or I think everybody knows how to find Radio World?
I didn't. There's a contact there's a contact link on our website, and that has both mine and John's email addresses. Okay. But well, I won't even bother telling you because you can find it easily enough on the website. But I will say, Conrad knows this, David knows this. They've heard this speech before. I live professionally on what I hear from people working in the field. And so getting ideas from you about what is going on in your jobs and your careers and what would help is critical. And, you know, and I mean that sincerely. So I love getting emails from people who say, got a story idea, or would you like to hear about this project I did, or something just happened at the station I work at that would be really cool. So let me know. And maybe even once in a while, the corporate people will let us tell the story, Conrad.
Yeah, I think everybody on this call can probably answer that with something cool going on in their facility. I should ask for a show of hands if anyone is not a subscriber of Radio World. If you didn't catch the link before, just Google Radio World. And if I remember correctly, you can just subscribe from the website. I've been a subscriber for 30 years or more. And always find it very interesting. And I do like the new format. If you haven't seen it, it's gone from like a newspaper to more of a magazine. It's done really nice. I'd like to ask Paul before we finish up too, can we have you back sometime? This has been fantastic having, even for me who was at the show, I didn't even know what was going on in the other parts of the convention center. So this has been fantastic. So I really appreciate it.
We make you a permanent after NAB meeting every year.
I am flattered to be asked, and I would be happy to come back. And
I can feed you.
And I'll pick your brains too, so it can be a mutually beneficial relationship.
We're looking for that. So yeah, feel free to collaborate at any time with SBE 15 in New York City and around the world.
Yes, and thank you for the service you provide to all of us. We appreciate you being there. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, with that, I guess I will call it, unless anyone has any last comments or suggestions or anything they want to talk about.
One last thing, June 30th, mark your calendar. We want to see each and every one of you at our barbecue. It's been too long since we've met in person. We're going to have some good food, some bizarre stories, and hopefully some games, prizes, and Conrad's rig.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And appreciate you joining us tonight. And thank you again, Paul, for the presentation. It was fantastic.
My pleasure.
Very good.
Thanks, John.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
You all take care.
Thanks for joining us. Please remember to subscribe to SBE 15 New York City